Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me thank you for coming this afternoon. I did indicate last Friday that I would have an opportunity to brief you on one or two matters. I did not expect that when I said so, that we would also have had as active a week as we in fact had with Hurricane Beryl. And therefore, that would have to be added to the things that we would want to brief you on. And in fact, that is really the majority of it, because this last week we have been consumed with the recovery efforts. I start first and foremost by saying thanks again. Thanks to God, thanks to the people of Barbados for us being able to be as resilient and as safe as we are today as a result of the passage of what has really become a historic, devastating hurricane that has destroyed in many ways elements of the Caribbean, in Carriacou, in Union Island, in Mairo, in St. Vincent itself on the mainland. There's been significant damage in Grenada. Prime Minister Holness this morning spoke of the extensive damage in Jamaica, even though not catastrophic, similar to us. And in Barbados' case, our damage has been far more severe than meets the eye initially, because it goes to the heart, not just of the fisheries sector, but our coastal infrastructure, our coastal assets, and indeed our tourism sector, with almost all of the beaches on the west coast having been destroyed, and equally with the Bridgetown Fishing Harbour having had a third of the breakwater destroyed completely, and with other aspects of the jetty in Oistins. And we have now learned as well, having been able to send down divers. Cabinet asked for the divers to go in. They were only able to go in at 10 o'clock this morning to be able to look at the outfall on the south coast of the island. And in fact, mercifully, when we took decisions to put the outfall there, we put an 8-inch pipe and a 12-inch pipe. The 8-inch pipe does have a break beyond the reef, and the 12-inch pipe and the 8-inch pipe are both floating. And we've given instructions for both of those to be anchored on the seabed again, with the anchor blocks that would have secured them for the last 3-4 years. And that is being done. The arrangements for that are being done as we speak. Regrettably, the boat that would normally carry out the anchor blocks was also destroyed in the hurricane. And to that extent, therefore, it has complicated matters a little bit, but we are satisfied that those repairs can take place. We have the 4 lengths of pipe that are needed, we have the anchor blocks that are needed, and we have the fittings that are needed to be able to hold it down. And as we speak, that is being dealt with. For the avoidance of doubt, and so that we take no risk whatsoever, we have asked that EPD go and test the water. But even before EPD brings back the result, I've taken the precaution of asking that Worthing Beach be closed temporarily until such time as we can have that part of the pipe fixed, and until such time as EPD itself can also guarantee that there are no issues with the water. I should say to you up front, there is no evidence whatsoever of sewage on the beach or sewage coming to shore. None whatsoever. And therefore what we have is simply the precaution that we've taken in doing our inspections post-Hurricane Beryl. That would have been one of the critical infrastructure assets. It could not, the divers could not go in earlier, largely because of the fact that the seas would not have allowed it, in the same way that we were not able to send in divers even in the Bridgetown Fishing Harbour in the first few days to be able to understand the lay of the land with respect to the amount of boats that have actually sunk. We think we know how many have sunk, but we can't say for sure until the divers finish that there as well. With respect to the fishing industry, we met again yesterday with the representatives of the fishing industry and the fisheries department, and we're actually putting together a whole package. There will be a bank account number released in the public service announcement. We've had a number of people offering to be able to support the industry, and we thank those who want to do so. The government of Barbados has received humanitarian donation from the Latin American Development Bank which has come to the government of $250,000 US. I've said to the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs that must go fully and straight, the full amount, to capitalize the first donation to the benevolent fund for fisherfolk in the country. Without prejudice to what may be done by the wider public and wider donations, we have asked that a number of measures be put in place. One, those who paid national insurance, that will not be an issue. Those who were not up to date with their national insurance, we are aware, obviously, or did not pay, that you are still suffering. And the government introduced in the middle of COVID something called a business interruption benefit, which is slightly less than what you would receive if you had paid national insurance and receiving a benefit. All will be entitled to receive the business interruption benefit over the next few months until we can get the industry back on its feet. In addition to that, I've given instructions for us to work with the financial institutions to be able to establish and for us to raise the funding to establish a 30-year revolving fund that will be available to help fishermen finance any new boats. And I've also agreed that we will give a grant, and we are in the hope of discussing with them. That grant will be available to fishermen in the tune of 25% of the cost of any new boat or repair, and the government will carry the cost for that for them, therefore ensuring that access to financing will not become a major issue. With respect to the issue of the question of the repairs to the harbors, we have already met with the coastal engineers. They are flying in, the ones who have done most of the work, on Tuesday next week, and we have now to await their recommendations. What I will share with the public is that they indicated to us that what we faced in Hurricane Beryl was more than a 1-in-100-year event, and that in fact it was so severe, the storm surge, that the dodos, those what I call jacks, that dodos, what I call jacks, are literally the concrete ones, that each one of those is 5 tons, and that the sea threw those 5-ton dodos like if it was throwing a ball. They have indicated that it is likely that the least weight we will be able to do those at going forward in future is 15 tons. And that will give you an understanding of how the climate crisis has so fundamentally changed what we anticipate. The fact that this is the first hurricane of a Category 4 nature to ever start in the month of June should tell us that this is truly, as I've been saying for 1 year now, the season of superlatives. The fact that it has done this extensive damage to us in our coastal infrastructure is totally regrettable. The fact, however, that we have saved lives and that there's no one who has died in Barbados as a result of Hurricane Beryl is a matter for which we shall give thanks, and is a matter which we shall use to remind persons that do not go out there and take risk with your life, as we continue to say throughout the entire system. So that is with respect to the Bridgetown Fishing Harbour. We've already given instructions for the repair of the jetty at Oystons, both the public jetty at Oystons as well as the private jetty, which is the one that delivers ice, and we will work with arrangements with the private owner to ensure that their lack of capacity is not a constraint on the refurbishment and rehabilitation of that second jetty. We took a tour yesterday of the West Coast beaches from St. Lucie right down to the port, and it is dread. It is dread. In the normal scheme of things, those things may be able to come back naturally, but as you're aware, that is a coast that helps pay the bills in this country, and therefore the damage has hit us where it hurts the most. My understanding from also the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association is that 73%, almost 3 in every 4 accommodation facilities have had some level of damage. There's been limited damage with the cruise or the pleasure vessels, as you would call them, and that effectively, mercifully for us, the summer season tends to be a little slower, and therefore you will be able to do a lot of the repairs. Most of the repairs related to sea walls, retaining walls, coastal infrastructure, pool, furniture on the side, that kind of thing. But the real damage on the beaches is the fact that if you go and look at them, you have, at Thunder Bay, you have about a 6-foot drop. It shows you the wisdom of us putting the vegetation on the beaches, because you can see the roots of the trees effectively holding the sand together, and beyond the roots you're not seeing the level of erosion that you would otherwise see. So we have to encourage Barbadians to continue to ensure, whether it is sea grape or coconut trees or what do you call it, the manchineel trees, or all of the different trees, they have, those that have an extensive root system do play a critical role in keeping the beach together. The government, in any event, was already making a decision, and I'm not going to speak about it extensively today. Suffice it to say that we are looking at a coherent approach from St. Lucie to the port of dealing with our beaches. In the past, you've seen some done here, some done there, some done there, some done publicly, some done privately. We believe that in the same way we have a unit to come to work every day to take care of the roads in the MTW, we must have a unit that comes to work every day to take care of the beaches. The Coastal Zone Management Unit that has been in existence for over 40 years is fundamentally about engineering advice and regulatory role. But we need an executing unit now that allows us to take care of these beaches on an ongoing basis and to work with the requisite professional services that will allow us to have the advice as to how and where you nourish the beaches, where you have to put seawalls, where you have to put groins, where you have to put offshore, underwater, breakwaters, and because this is the world in which we live in now. And more, in my lifetime, our relationship with hurricanes has done us more coastal damage than onshore damage. That does not mean that at some point we're not going to have a hurricane that hits us directly and does extensive damage to housing. But I think you remember Tropical Storm Lenny some time back. That did us extensive damage where the waves started to move from a different direction. And certainly in this particular case again. With respect to the agricultural sector, for the most part that was unscathed, but we also would have heard that the banana farms would have been the ones that would have suffered. And there's one big banana plantation, but there's some smaller banana farms. And the wind, you don't need a lot of high wind to tear up bananas or banana leaves. So we would understand and expect that that would happen. And the ministry is engaging with that sector now in order to be able to see what can be done. You understand? I'm told that about 35 acres have been affected with respect to the damage with respect to the bananas. With respect to the housing section, the Ministry of Housing, we did not have a lot of housing damage, and the Ministry of Housing is already doing those assessments and looking to start support for those persons as soon as possible with respect to it. Those generally relate to the updating with the brief with respect to the hurricane. Part of the difficulty is that work that we may not have been planning for the breakwater at the Bridgetown port for another few years in our public sector investment program has to be brought forward. Those waves made that breakwater look like child's play, and it led to the sinking of the Jolly Roger and the Dream Chaser. Equally, we're going to have to, as I said, do the repairs and the expansion. We were ironically in discussion on the expansion of the Bridgetown Fishing Harbour. At the time, we've had 2 meetings in the last month, and at the time when this has happened. I'm told that a statement was made that the government is liable for damages for the harbour. I think that the Attorney General will tell you that a first or a second year law student would know in the course of the law of torts and negligence specifically that there's something called an act of God, and contracts speak to force majeure. which clearly are beyond the capacity of any legal liability and do not impose legal liability on anyone. But suffice it to say that we don't need to know what our obligation is to a sector that employs so many thousands of Barbadians. My one regret is that there was not sufficient conversation beforehand about the insurance, and they now know that that is something that in which we will find policy responses to help. For the last 18 months, I've been saying what is uninsurable becomes what? Uninvestable. And largely it means if you're going to borrow money from the bank, what does the bank tell you when you borrow money for a car or a house or anything else? You have to insure it. So these are not problems that we can't solve. Our biggest issue will be the capacity issue of being able to allow those who have to have new boats be able to get them. There are only 2 moles on the island with respect to the construction of boats, ice boats of that size, but we're already in contact with a number of other countries looking to see what are the options either in terms of purchase or construction, and that effort will continue over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks so that we can have a faster pace of renewal. And of course, as we've said to the Chief Fisheries Officer, we want to see to build back better. Grantley Adams took the industry from sail to engine. Sir Harold St. John took it from day boat to ice boat. Now that this has happened, it is our opportunity to take it and to ensure that we use modern technology wherever available, and that we also get the most fuel efficient or alternative fuels to be able to see if they are commercially feasible. The one other thing that I'd want to talk and address this afternoon, relates to the level of crime that has been taking place in the country. This is a matter of grave concern to all of us. We have, for some time, invested a number of resources with respect to the fighting of crime. And indeed, mercifully, we had asked for an independent assessment to be done by the Independent International Police Assistance Service through both the British government and the Commonwealth Secretariat. That report came in, and there are a number of recommendations that were made. But the police, and we've had a series of meetings in the last 3 weeks, the last meeting being on Wednesday of this week, 2 days ago, with the National Security Council, where we were informed, and it was settled and received our endorsement, that the police would take 2 of those recommendations to operationalize. One, they want to be able to establish a serious organized crime unit that is dedicated to the fighting of organized crime in this country. The reality is that we have, over the course of the last few weeks in particular, having seen an abeyance of it for over 15, 16 months, seen a spike of crime where persons who know one another have been the victims of murder. The AG will also tell you that the police have indicated to us in very clear terms, and perhaps they need to do that more so to the public, that in many instances, the cases of what we are seeing are not arbitrary crime, but are cases where people know each other, and where in some instances, you may even use the word vendetta, is being perpetrated. This is not the way to settle business in this country. We have law courts, and therefore it cannot in any way be tolerated. But what is equally of concern, this government in 2019 passed amendments to the Bail Act that allowed us to say that persons should not get bail if they are charged with murder or a serious firearms offense, and that should not, the bail should not be available to them for the first 24 months. In other words, we respect your right to fair process and a right to a court case, but that court case should take place within that time frame, and that we should go forward. That legislation became the subject of a constitutional motion, and an oral decision was given 3 years ago by the court at first instance, I believe, or some years ago. The point is that that was also striking down the particular section. That was also appealed. The appeal was heard at the beginning of this year. The government has indicated that it cannot be hamstrung purely on waiting for a judgment while people are doing foolishness out there. It is to my certain knowledge that there have been at least 6 victims of murder in recent years who themselves were charged with murder and on bail. It is to my certain knowledge that there were at least 3 people who have been charged with murder, multiple murders, who themselves have been put on bail and have repeated the murders. We have made a determination that without prejudice to anything else, that there is sufficient work to be done and research, and we've started it by looking at other Commonwealth jurisdictions where they have, in fact, unlike Barbados, Barbados does not have a right to bail in its constitution, but there are other jurisdictions that have clearly balanced the interests of the rights of liberty with the interests of justice. And the interest of justice means the interest of all in the community to be protected by the law as well, and public safety. In those circumstances, we have determined that in short order, we are prepared to bring amendments or a new bill, depending on what the AG's drafters recommend to him, in the near future, in short order, to be able to look at ensuring that persons who are charged with murder or firearm offenses are not given bail to go out there and walk about and kill people or put people at risk or threat again. And that is without prejudice to anything else. Because if the court ruled tomorrow that it was unconstitutional, we would have to bring a new bail act or new amendments. If it doesn't rule that it is unconstitutional, we don't have to do anything. So we have decided to take in front and ensure that the Parliament is in a position to ensure that the police and those who are charged with the protection of people and public safety in this country have the legislative protection and the ability to ensure that people who do not have a reason to be afraid of the law or to be afraid of the deprivation of liberty can continue with impunity and go out there and shoot and kill people. And this, I regret that the appellate process has taken as long and the whole court process has taken as long as it did. But sometimes you have to ensure that different arms of the state act independently. What we can't do is act in breach of the court. What we can do is act in protection of public safety by looking at either amendments to the Bail Act or indeed a new Bail Act if that is what the Attorney General recommends. And I look forward to our being able, in short order, to be able to address these issues. Secondly, the recommendations from the report received by the police would see the establishment of a serious organized crime unit, as I said, which will then be focused entirely on organized crime and gangs, without prejudice to the work of major crime and without prejudice to the work of any other unit in the police service. Why? Because people must come to work every day to ensure that this is wrestled down and that this country is not held to ransom by people who want to act in a way that is inimical to people's liberty and safety and property in this country. At the same time, we accept fully that the crime prevention efforts require everybody. And to that extent, community policing remains a critical component of all that we are doing. In addition to the 10 community police officers that are there, we have asked that the recommendation coming from the same IPAS that the police have received, they have asked me to consider if we will agree, 1, to the creation of temporary posts for the serious organized crime unit, and we've agreed to that. 2, if we will agree to the deployment of the police band in communities to be able to underpin community policing and also to be able to ensure that they can engage with youngsters in a positive way that will help, 1, give them more skills, but at the same time help them to understand that all police are not necessarily about anything that is inimical to their interests, and that with normal community police, as you can see across the country, they have good relationships with the neighborhood and with the parents and the children in the neighborhood. And we believe that the Barbados Police Service Band, which has a history of over 100 years, is well placed to be able to help us in that effort. If they need additional instruments and other things to be able to put out there so that they can use these youngsters, give these youngsters a chance to have purpose and skills at the same time, then we will work with them to provide that across a number of communities. At the same time, the government has announced, as you know, an extensive community sports program, whether in football, whether in cricket, and whether in motorsports or indeed in road tennis. And we are hoping to do so with netball once the new refurbishment of the netball stadium is done. But beyond that, there must be public cooperation. The police have already said, see something, say something. It is not meant to be just an ad on TV or an ad on social media. The people whose lives are at risk are in our community. The people who are causing the problems are in our community. And regrettably, a gun does not give you any error for recovery in a way that even a rock stone or a 2x3 might have done years ago. And to that extent, therefore, if you are seeing people hiding guns around you, say something, because you may be the next victim, or somebody who you love may be the next victim. And whether we like it or not, a gun doesn't walk and talk. A gun is a tool used by people who want to cause harm or incite fear. And that cannot be acceptable to us. We are therefore asking people to step up. And the stepping up is not just the people in the community to see something or say something, but we are asking for an organized program for Step Up. We are asking for people to be able to recognize that with respect to all that's going on, we need a coordinated effort between the police, between the social workers and psychologists and mental health workers, with the community development workers, with the life and parental coaches that we hope to establish soon, with the youth commissioners, and with all groups across the community. Because unless Bajans step up and help claim it, you can't rely only on the law enforcement officers. Full stop. And we've been very, very clear about that. When we had a previous challenge in previous years, when we were last in government, that's when we put the lights on the playing fields. That's when we were able to bring down robberies and burglaries and firearm crime at the time significantly. And I believe that if it is the will of this country, we can do it again. What I will say is that there's simply too much anger and too much anxiety out there. And people are flying off at anything. A man pours somebody drink out for him to drink, man end up dead. A woman don't like how somebody talking to her, you're in trouble and problems going down the road. No ability to resolve conflict, all of these things. Let me bring the temperature down. Let me bring the temperature down and recognize that I never see a dead man walk yet. I never see a dead man walk yet. And then for those who you leave behind, what is the amount of grief and crying, and in some instances, children without a father or a mother, what are they going to do? Depending on the mercy of somebody else. We know better. We know better. And therefore, this is as much not just about the police or legislation or the courts. This is about every Bajan household and community, because the guns hiding not in the sea, they're hiding on land. And therefore, see something, say something. I admit that you may want to say it quietly and privately, and the AG, the police, will put measures in place for confidential intel. By the same token, we need equally to bring down the temperatures, and the vexatious and the spirit and the angry spirit are not helping us to resolve conflict. And one of the things that I've asked the Office of the Attorney General to do is also look at bringing public service announcements to help people how to resolve conflict. Because in this last month, while a number of the murders related to people who knew each other with gun crime, there were a few of them that relate to disputes that should never have seen people die in this country. And therefore, I'm asking us, the only good thing is that a lot of the crime is not arbitrary. And that's the one good thing. But sometimes you gotta breathe and pause. We are not as bad as others in the region, but the direction that we're going in is one that we are not prepared to accept. And this government has increased the number of judges, so there is no excuse for murder cases and firearm cases not being heard within 6 to 9 and definitely 12 months. 2, we increased the number of prosecutors. We increased the number of judges by 6, from 2 to 8. We increased the number of prosecutors by either 6 or 8. I can't remember the exact number. We have also increased the provisioning for the police with respect to all of the equipment and all of the services that they need in order and the funds that are being given to the police are higher than they ever have been per capita and outside of inflation. So what does that tell us? That we need now to cease and settle and ask ourselves what is going on and how can we as a nation band together and work together. I'm happy that the leader of the opposition agrees with me that nobody should get bail for murder. But he equally will know that the constraint that we've had is that the legislation which he also supported in 2019 has been the subject of this legal case. And I'm saying that rather than sit down and wait and don't know when the Court of Appeal judgment is coming, bring a new piece of legislation or bring a new amendment. And let us get on with the business of protecting people in this country so that people, in my time, nobody got bail for murder. I practice criminal law. You understand? And so long as you can bring the case on within that time frame, no reason for anything else. So those are the things that I wanted to talk about briefly here today. The South Coast thing which we just discovered, the general update on the Hurricane Beryl, and then some comments that I've had in my heart to say for a little bit now with respect to the crime and to talk the country through these things because we know better and we can do better. Over to you, gentlemen and ladies. That is a question.
Hi, good afternoon. Corval Manzi, Nation News. Madam PM, I know it's early days yet still, but if you just may go back to the disaster and what you're unearthing at this time. Given the repair that we have to undertake, do you think that the feasibility of triggering the disaster clause is something that might be on the table as it relates to?
No. In this particular case, we're looking at the contingent credit that may be available from either the Inter-American Development Bank or the World Bank. But in our judgment, the scale of the damage is not such that Barbados should invoke the natural disaster clauses. Those things are not to be invoked lightly, and I hope that they will never have to be invoked, but if we get the serious damage that we do across the island, plus the coastal infrastructure, because we're so small that invariably if you get hurt on land, you're going to get hurt on the coast. So far we get hurt on the coast, but not on land. So we will not invoke it at this stage. I understand why Grenada is, and I fully support that. I have a meeting with heads again. We had a heads of government meeting this morning. We have another one tomorrow morning again, where I've been asked to work and coordinate with our international assistants. And also the fact that, in our case, for example, the fact that I've got to bring forward projects. There will be development funding that I now have to go and look for, but it is different from disaster recovery and the kind of complete decimation that I would have anticipated that we would need if we were to invoke the natural disaster clauses. If we did, I would get the relief of about $2 billion in debt payments in the next 2 years. And that would be an overkill with respect to what we have. We would have had to build out a new breakwater at the port anyhow. We would have had to build out a new breakwater in the fishing harbor anyhow. So those are things that we were planning in our public sector investment program, but not to be the subject of that kind of relief. Since I've been talking to you, a number of our development partners actually have been calling based on our inclination to speak with them and to be able to have a regional coordinated approach. The full damage assessment is still taking place. What I'm giving you is the preliminary stuff based on our own eyes and our own thing. As I said, even in the fishing harbor, we don't have the report from the divers yet as to exactly how many boats have sunk, and that's largely because you had to wait for the conditions of the sea to come down. Even the same ones who went out for us this morning are out until this afternoon for the oil companies, looking at oil lines and other things. So that's where we are.
And my follow-up question, not on that issue, but on the fishing industry. I know it is clear based on what you have stated that you have rejected the opposition leader's argument of legal liability as it relates to compensation to those boat owners.
I would like you to go and ask the law faculty to give you a section on the law of negligence, acts of God, and force majeure, and print it as a public duty. Okay,
that's no problem. However, the whole idea, another part of his argument is that from precedent, given bailouts during COVID to the tourism sector, that similar should be. Well, it
I just announced that we are giving people 25% grant for repairs or purchase, and then we are also going to work to ensure that they have access to a 30-year revolving fund at low interest rates in order to not only repurchase assets, but we recognize that some of them may be carrying debt and may need to include that debt in the amount that they borrow for the repurchase of assets. Now, we will speak to the financial sector for those who have loans and ask for a moratorium because it is clear to everyone that they're not in a position to repay that debt because they don't have the earnings coming in. So we've gone way beyond what others have asked for, including the fishing sector. Okay? But at the same time, these are private businesses. In the case of the tourism sector, if I may remind you, the government of Barbados put a system in place no different from this, where we put a revolving fund that could be treated either as loans or equity. Now, we have said that if there are fishermen that will not be able to get there on their own, we are prepared to create what is known as a special purpose vehicle that will have what is known as segregated cells. And each cell would relate to a different person or entity, okay? And so if you have a cell for Emmanuel, a cell for you, a cell for William, you understand? But the legal liability doesn't cross over. What it means is that if we have to help by taking equity, limited equity, and they're separate from the grant, we will do that, and then people can pay us back out when they are in a position to do so. We did the same thing for the hotel sector. The same business interruption benefit for people who were self-employed who did not pay NIS is exactly what we did for COVID. We're doing the same thing here now again. But in addition to that, well, no, we did it because we had the benevolent fund that was open too. And we are creating a benevolent fund account for persons to be able to donate. There we've had homeowners from certain areas indicating they want to donate, but the government has been given a letter, and I want to thank the Latin American Development Bank, otherwise known as CAF, who gave us $250,000 US towards our efforts with Hurricane Beryl, and the government has said, no, don't give it to us. Put the money straight in the benevolent fund for fisher folk. So in every respect, we've either done the same or more than was done before, and therefore a little research would go a good way for the leader of the opposition. I understand the problem yesterday, because the leader of the opposition was more concerned yesterday with obfuscation, because on that same day yesterday, as he was meeting, you had a situation where a letter on that day was written to the General Secretary, Mr. Steve Blackett, to tell him that he would be that the charges brought against him will continue on Tuesday, 9th of January 2024 at 5 p.m. at the Errol Bar Gallery, George Street, St. Michael. Now, the same time he was giving you that press conference, this letter was going out, and perhaps you should go and look at that, but that is not for me to get into. and it is, as Owen Arthur would say, it is not yet happy hour.
Oh, sorry. Emmanuel Joseph, Barbados today. Your government went to all the lengths to amend the Constitution to ensure that judgments are brought back within a reasonable time. But yet we're still having these long delays.
I agree. And in fact, I wrote a letter to the former Chief Justice just before he retired based on letters written to me by members of the bar asking for reports, and I'm awaiting those reports. There is a process. The public has objected. They've written to me. I have written to the former Chief Justice. I would imagine that the former Chief Justice has passed it over to the new Chief Justice. And that once that report comes, if there is a case to be answered, then all due actions, AG, will be taken, not true?
That's right.
But I only received that letter, Roy, we received that letter, what, in March or April? Yes. And we wrote off to the former Chief Justice. And we're yet to have the report back with us. So we're on the same page.
Okay. Dr. AG, you want to add something?
No, I come with that. But if I can, the delivery of judgments continues to be a serious challenge for us, but the criminal bench has absolutely been performing extraordinarily well. And therefore, our initiative of making sure, remember when we came together, there were only 2 criminal judges, and even they used to rotate in and out. And that was the session. That's right, we had the studies. But those criminal judges, one month they were doing family, and then they were going to come down and do that for 6 months and then come back up. And so they weren't dedicated. And we immediately set about increasing the number of judges, establishing a permanent criminal bench so that you would be on the criminal bench for an extended period of time.
And then we added a further 3 criminal judges. So even though we had COVID to deal with, which stopped jury trials, the criminal bench waded through a significant amount of work then, and they've continued to perform tremendously. If you look at the court pages, the volume of matters that are going through the criminal bench are so they are really pulling some weight. The issue we have to address is, of course, the civil bench, and the Chief Justice has begun to have some views on it and some discussions with me as to how we can get that going. But the criminal side was never a victim of the 6-month problem.
I should tell you that we forget that during COVID, the criminal cases effectively came to a halt because of the inability to have jury trials. So that in all that we're talking about, we had just under a 3-year period where it could not be normal business as usual. And in spite of that, I believe that they've done a commendable job. We have certainly resumed normal business. And I think the 2 criminal justice consultations that the Attorney General had last year that involved the entire national stakeholders, you've begun to see the output of that come. We had the jury trial, judge alone trials, and there are 2 other pieces of legislation?
There are several others about to come. We will shortly be seeing the plea bargain legislation, new civil procedure rules,
criminal procedure
rules, and along the way we will also be seeing amendments to the Sexual Offences Act to deal with the striking down of parts of the offense against the persons legislation. So there's quite a lot of stuff that's happening.
Now, all of that effectively flowed out of that level of consultation that we took care of last year. And similarly, these 2 recommendations that I've just highlighted today for you, are just a part of a suite of recommendations that came from the International Police Assistance Service that would have helped the police, not just here. Okay?
Final question.
In terms of the amended or revised Bail Act, I'm just asking from a layman's perspective here. In the absence of the Court of Appeals ruling, I mean, what's the plan of action to circumvent the Constitution?
It's not circumventing anything. Let's get it straight. The Constitution does not have a right to bail. And I'd invite you to read the first few sections of the Constitution under the Declaration of the Rights, and then all of the fundamental rights section. So you'll read it and you will see, a layman can see that there's no right to bail there. Secondly, we are not circumventing anything. We have a judgment at first instance that said that a clause was offensive and should be struck down. We are saying that we can either accept that and bring amendments, or we can appeal. We appealed, but the judgment has not come from the appeal. And we've been waiting. And we do not believe that we should hamstring the police or the country in its efforts to be able to secure public safety by waiting for a judgment when we also have the option of bringing amendments or a new piece of legislation. In South Africa and elsewhere, they have drafted provisions that make it clear that the bail is given only in the interest of justice, correct?
Yes.
In those circumstances, they set out with particularity what those conditions can be and what are the considerations that the court can take into place. It is just, therefore, another approach that balances the rights of the defendant with the rights of the interests of justice in a way that is acceptable. They have a constitutional court, we don't. Those provisions were passed in 1977 under their Criminal Procedure Act. This is now 2025. They have a far more litigious constitutional court than us. They have not been struck down. And our courts are subject to both, not just UK precedent, but common law precedent. And the South African courts effectively are based on common law. Their constitution is also far more liberal than anything that we have in our constitution. Now, I just give that one example, but I can equally go to other jurisdictions. And all we're saying is that in short order, the Attorney General and his draftsmen will bring and give us an option as to how to deal with this if we do not get. I can't tell the Court of Appeal to bring judgment tomorrow, nor can he.
Or what to decide.
Or what to decide. But if they decide and uphold the first instance, then I would still have to go and draft. So I've said, look, don't wait anymore. Just go and draft. You understand? Take him front before it take you. Go and draft. Now, if they came back and before we go to Parliament and said that they disagree with the first instance judge, then we would not need, we haven't lost anything other than some hours for drafting.
Though there are some salutary features of the South African legislation that we will want to import in any event.
To strengthen ours. So all we're doing is saying, look, circumstances demand that we take a different approach, but it is not in any way circumventing anything. Because we would be forced to do the exact same thing we are doing if the Court of Appeal ruled against us. But we do not want to be hamstrung by an appellate process, because we're conscious also that after the Court of Appeal comes what? Oh my dear. So that we would then be leaving the country open to a situation where the leader of the opposition and I agree that the people on murder should not get bail. You can't want a more perfect, coordinated position of harmony than that. Any more questions? Emmanuel? You good? Well, good afternoon. It's Friday. Look, let me just say, it's been a long week for you guys too. And very often, people don't recognize half this week as I move from position to position to position, you guys were around and lifting the heavy weight in order to be able to tell the people of the country what has been happening. I should have said one other thing too, but I want to thank you for being there and for turning up for duty to make sure that we could warn Barbadians where was safe, where was not safe. I want to thank the Ministry of Public Works and also Barbadians, William, many of the private sector, as well as ordinary Bajans came out and helped in the cleanup. If you drive through Barbados, certainly on the roads, they look nothing like they look on Monday afternoon. The Oystins Bay Garden, I believe, is open for business tonight. They had 3 to 4 foot of sand in different parts of it. And for the record, storm surge that brought in sand has nothing to do with drainage, but that's a different story. So I really want to thank everybody, the Youth Advance Corps, the fish vendors, the Oystins Bay Garden stall owners, the people who volunteered, SSA, Public Works, Drainage, Defense Force. Defense Force is still anchoring the recovery salvage effort at the fisheries market. I want to thank everybody, because without this level of cooperation, we would not be seeing this level of progress. But we still have a long way to go to get the detailed assessment of damage and to put in place now the things that we want to put in place to ease the burden on those who have suffered damage. There will be another bank account open for the victims for the benefit of Grenada and St. Vincent and Grenadines, Hurricane Beryl. Just as the government has already mobilized some things that Prime Minister Gonzalez needed, and we've also allocated our Consul General in Miami to work on behalf of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to coordinate anything that is needed up there. I believe that there are a number of Bajans who of their own, just as we saw with some of the private sector yesterday, with some water and other materials and things, would want to be able to contribute, and therefore those details on both of those accounts will be given out very shortly. And I would want to encourage that even as we face, and let me remind us what we did in COVID. When the Indian government decided to give us 100,000 vaccines, what did we do? We shared. A little with content is great gain. The fact that it went 80 miles south of Barbados, it could easily have been directly over us and 80 miles south of Grenada, or 80 miles south of St. Vincent. And I would want, in the same way that I've appealed to Bajans to let us do what we have to do to keep our country safe, I want to appeal to Bajans to let us do what we have to do to ensure that those who have lost everything in Union Island, the stories are heartbreaking. In Mairo, that old cathedral at the top, not cathedral, the church at the top, that was destroyed. The people who've lost their lives, and Prime Minister Gonzalez regrettably is still finding out the numbers of people who may have lost their lives. Prime Minister Mitchell, all of them are under severe pressure as they try to hold things together. If we in Barbados can help lift a little weight, and I've indicated the same thing, that if there are people with family here, when school reopens and they're not in a position to get schooling in those countries, we will also open up. And of course our hospitals and everything remain open, because these are our brothers and sisters. And I think Colville, you too, I'm sure have family in St. Vincent, and I'd want to extend our support and good wishes and prayers to all who may have been affected, even on the mainland, because the drama in those islands in the Grenadines has been so strong, people forget that the mainland, in both the north of Grenada and the south of St. Vincent, got serious damage too. Okay? Thank you very much.